Alright, round three. We're on the draw. And I think this hand is not super good, but it's it's certainly good enough to keep. Where we have a turn 2 Smuggler's Copter, turn 3. By turn 3, hopefully we would have drawn a blue creature that we can use to crew the Copter. And if we're on defense, we could just sit back with the Copter and the creature. And unless they kill the creature on our end step, then they'll have to basically kill both in order to get through with an attacker. Because if they kill the creature, then we use it to crew the copter, and then they have to kill the copter, or we get to block with it. Or if we're not on the back foot, then we can just crew the copter and attack. And yeah, we have 4 lands, which is all we want, and that's enough to cast the master. But if we draw more lands, then the copter is a great way to cycle through those to get more spells. So I feel like this hand is fine, and it's a reasonable keep. Goblin Guide. Ugh. Goblin Guide on the play, that's a little rough. Revealing Spreading Seas. Okay, not exactly what we want. Into Goblin Guide Swift Spear. Okay, so yeah, this is not really the draw to combat that. It's like we don't have a turn 1 play, and Ballista, for one, doesn't kill any of those creatures. If they had played a 1 toughness creature, then we could, block a Goblin Guide, then sack to kill the other one. But given what they're up to, I thought about playing the Copter there to set up a play the following turn, where we could just play the Architect and pass. That might have been the better line, but I was kind of thinking at this point we're about to take another 5-point hit and go to 8, so like they they like we kind of just have to stem the bleeding somehow. And my thinking was, okay, we kind of just have to Spreading Seas into something good and be able to just like cast 2 spells or something the following turn. Uh, I don't know, things are looking pretty bleak with a double Goblin Guide Swift Spear draw on the play. Um, yeah, Bolt of Spree Combat. I don't like where this is going. Take 6, go to 4, revealing Field of Ruin, and Architect, and now we're just dead. So, I mean, we could keep playing. We're not technically dead. Or are we? Yeah, we are technically dead because they suspended the Riftbolt as well. So if we had played Copter instead of Spreading Seas, then we're still just dead. Uh, yeah, because the Riftbolt comes off, we go to 1, we can't produce 3 blockers. Yeah, the opponent just had like a really powerful draw on the play that game. Not much we could do about it. What we could have done if we had, well, I guess it's game 1, but like in a post-board game, if we have explosives in our sideboard, we could have played turn 1 explosives after they went turn 1 Goblin Guide. Or if we're on the play, obviously we do it in preemptively. And then that would keep them from playing their other 1-drops. Or they would be able to 2 or 3 for 1 them if they do play them. So turn 1 explosives is pretty good against them. Considerably better than Brittle Effigy. So again, I would recommend making that swap. But what we did in this matchup is we brought in Spellskite, we brought in Basilisk Collar, we brought in Chalice of the Void, and we brought in the 4th Trinket Mage. And we took out one of the 3 Vendilion Clicks, one of the Ether Vials, and 2 of the Serum Visions. And if you have the explosives in your sideboard, I would cut like a Spreading Seas for it. So we actually have a fair number of cards that aren't super good in this matchup. I would consider just cutting all 4 of the Spreading Seas. Given that they're, a 2-color deck that can really operate off of kind of just 1 red mana, they don't really give us time to cast the Spreading Seas. At least on the draw, maybe we take them out. My Serum Visions might be better than Spreading Seas just because it's cheaper. even though the Spreading Seas does do some stuff to their mana. What we really want in this matchup, though, is we want to kind of gum up the board and not take damage from the Goblin Guides and such. And then once we get to a position where we can start spell stuttering their spells and walking ballisting them and getting a Master of Waves out. Master of Waves, they might have Path to Exile, otherwise they have no answer to it. And it just really dominates the board because it's pro red, so they can't touch it, they can't attack into it, they can't block it. Then it comes with it with all these tokens, and so they have to deal with all the tokens individually. And so Master of Waves is really good. And if you want to improve this matchup, I would recommend upping the Spellskite count. We can talk about that. Actually, might as well talk about it now. If you want to improve this matchup, you want to probably take out a Ceremonial Rejection and a Void Mage Prodigy to add Spellskite number 2 and 3. So we have 3 Spellskite in the board and then 3 of the other 2 cards. That would make this matchup better, and basically any of the matchups that Spellskite's great against, like Infect. Um, we did not do that, but it is a thing we could do. And if you want to improve your Burn or Infect matchup, I would recommend it. So now, game 2, we're on the play. This hand seems pretty strong because we have Spellstutter Sprite is good against all their 1 mana spells, and we can even counter a 2 mana spell with a second Sprite. And Copter isn't super good against them, but it is pretty good in conjunction with the Spellstutter. So if they are relying on, for instance, bolting the Copter after we crew it, so we maybe play the first Spellstutter to counter a spell, then we play the Copter, and then they attack into our board, and we crew the Copter, and they're like, aha, Lightning Bolt. I'm like, Spellstutter number 2, and then block, and then kill, basically eat your attacker, and then pitch one of our extra lands. So I could see this hand come together. Can't really ship a hand that has double counterspell Sprite. Again, of course, why not? Turn 1 Goblin Guide. We have another Sprite. Basically, you're going to cast anything they counter anything they cast. And the reason I did that, like obviously they baited us and they got us. We would rather have countered a Goblin Guide. But my thinking was, if they start with Lava Spike and we let it resolve, and then they just suspend a Rift Bolt, then, well, we're kind of in a rough situation where we're just going to basically cast a Spellstutter Sprite for no value, or like, what are we going to do here? So, like, a Lava Spike to the face is enough to Spellstutter Sprite. If we know that they're going to follow it up with Goblin Guide, we'd rather counter the Goblin Guide. But at that point, we can't really take that risk. So we just, countered the thing we could counter when we could counter it. Now we take 4 to the face, down to 14. That was a pretty good draw. So now we have a couple of, we could block here. I don't know that it would be wrong to double block a Goblin Guide in this spot, but I figure the Wanderer could trade for a burn spell at some point. Maybe like a Boros Charm, or, I just feel like the Wanderer is going to trade for damage anyway. No real sense doing it now. So what did we reveal? We revealed another Mausoleum Wanderer. I think that's why I didn't block. So next turn we could play land, and we could play Wanderer and attack, or we could play Copter. So we're just going to play the Copter and leave up Spellstutter. And basically now the Copter is going to hold both their Goblin Guides back. So the Rift Bolting us, so we're going to go to 7. Can't counter it. And so then they don't attack because we have the Copter holding back their team. We could just crew the copter and block, and they're basically sacrificing the Goblin Guide to trade with our spell stutter because we could just chump block, or we could just take it and go to 5, and yeah, so it's not worth attacking for them. Now in this spot, so some people might get hasty and just jam the Master of Waves. That is almost certainly the wrong play in this spot. So the Wanderers, when they're stuck on 2 mana, are going to act as counterspells for any sort of 2 mana burn spell, and it looks like they're trying to cast a 2 mana burn spell because they don't have a ton of 1 mana instants. They have 2 mana instants and they have 1 mana sorceries. And so they're probably just looking to trade off a 2 mana instant for a Wanderer during our end step. And we're going to try to punish them. We want to get these spell starter sprites out of our hand before the Master, and then like ideally we sort of empty their hand of most of their cards, and then we cast the Master and set up a 1-turn lethal. So we give them like 1 window to do stuff, and yeah, so I feel like getting the Wanderer out there, it gives us a free attack with this Wanderer, and we're still holding the 2 guides back with our Copter, on top Wanderer, and Spell Stutter. And if we're going to sack a Wanderer, it might as well just be the tapped one, you know, on their turn, I mean, or on our end step. So they do attempt to use 2 mana instant, and we could have Spell Starter sprited it, but instead we chose to use the Wanderer because I feel like the Spell Starter is a more reliable counterspell at this point. And here we do not cast the Serum Visions because we would like to just double Spell Stutter at this point. So we Spell Stutter the Helix. Now we can Spell Stutter anything they do. So now they Boros Charm, we Spell Stutter that. Now, Swift Spear, don't really care about that. Now, we can play the Master. So even though we drew a click, and that would be a pretty good, line to play Serum Visions click, they're down to 1 card. Since they played Land, Swift Spear, and they Helix into Boros Charmed between our end step and their turn. So now they're down really low on cards. We can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, get 5 elemental tokens this turn, which basically sets up lethal or close to lethal the following turn. There's no way they're attacking into this board. If they're between their last card and their draw step, it has to be 2 burn spells because we're at 7, and they can't get 7 damage out of 2 1-mana burn spells. So if it's like 2 lightning bolts, they can only get us to 1. Then we can attack them and basically have them dead the following turn. So if it's a 2-mana spell and a 1-mana spell, say a Boros Charm and a Lightning Bolt, or a Boros Charm and a Lava Spike, we can counter the second one with the Wanderer because they wouldn't have any extra mana. So the Wanderer is going to keep us from taking lethal, so we can safely resolve the Master of Waves this turn without any threat of dying on our turn. And so then when we get to untap, if we untap with the Master, then we get to basically crew the Copter and set up a huge attack. We get our draw step. We get the Copter is going to loot for us next turn, the Looter Scooter. And so we're going to have multiple attempts at finding another counterspell. And we could even Serum Visions. So that would be like, we could do the Serum Visions first, so we could draw a card that's 1 draw step. Then we cast Serum Visions to draw another card that's 2. Then we're scrying 2, and so if we find something, then we can then attack with the Copter to draw that card, or we can bottom both of them. So we'd be looking at a max, like up to 5 cards to try to find a counterspell next turn. And if we could find a counterspell, then whatever card they have in hand, they're just dead. So I figure this is a good spot. We can even click them after they draw if we chose to go that route instead, or if we don't find anything out of all that. So then if they draw like a lava spike or something, we can take it because it would have to be an instant. So yeah, we're basically just in a really good position here at this point, because I've said that before and they died to a lightning bolt. But yeah, so the opponent didn't even played out. What I was going to do was attack with Wanderer and Copter, because then that sets up, I think, the lock. Because they can block 3 things next turn. That's 1, 2, 3. So we'd take 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we'd have to get in 3 damage. And then if we assume one of them is like a bolt, so they can bolt one of our creatures, then we want to get the extra point of damage in. So we attack with the Wanderer. Then they'd have to use their bolt on our creature instead of our face, which means they'd be drawing dead on their next turn. So that's why I would attack with the Wanderer and the Copter this turn. And then yeah, I guess this means they don't have Path to Exile. Otherwise, I don't know why they would concede that turn. But so we got that game. Just counterspelled some of their key cards, and then gave us enough of a window to cast the Master. We just rode that to victory. So obviously can't keep this hand. Can keep this one. We have the turn 1 Vial into Wanderer and some payoff cards. Copter, I keep this one because we go turn 1 Vial, turn 2 Copter, Vial into play the Wanderer, block with Copter. So we're kind of in a position where we were in, I believe it was a previous game where they basically have to have an instant speed burn spell. It's like a bolt or a helix. And if they don't have the 3rd land, which a lot of times they don't have a 3rd land in this mono red deck, then the Wanderer could counter a helix. So they're basically down to they really have to have a bolt to not get their creature blown out mid-combat by our play. So we top the Copter. Ooh, Eidolon. Well, the Vial can get around that to some extent. Not a good draw step. So we take 2, obviously, to set up this play. So now, I mean, okay, oh, they do have the 3rd land, but they play the Goblin Guide first. Okay, so now, if they have a Helix, that's not going to work because we could just sack the Wanderer. So they're going to attack. So they attack. What do we reveal with Goblin Guide? It's not a land, unfortunately. It's a Spreading Seas. Yuck. Anyway, so now we're going to activate the Vial to put Wanderer on the battlefield. And then we're going to use the Wanderer to crew the Copter, and then the Copter gets to block the Eidolon. So if they have Helix, we can, after we crew the Copter, we can sack the Wanderer to counter the Helix targeting our Copter, so we can still eat the Eidolon. So it has to be exactly Lightning Bolt, I guess, or Path to Exile. But since they conceded last game without drawing their card, I would assume that they don't have Path, that they're just straight burn. So it looks like we're again in a position where it's kind of Lightning Bolt or no. If you don't have the Lightning Bolt, we're in really good shape. If you do have the Lightning Bolt, things are looking really bad. So make them have it. Play out the Wanderer, crew the Copter, go to blocks. Oh no, you had it. Oh no. Alright, so now Copter down. We take 6, go to 10. We draw our Spreading Seas. Now we're in an awkward position. So Vial doesn't get any creatures on the battlefield. We have a pair of 3 drops. That's not going to help us. We could Serum Visions to try to draw something, but then we take 2 from the Eidolon. We could try to Spreading Seas their Foundry, but we take 2 from the Eidolon. So it's kind of like, well, I mean, I would love to cycle this Vision or this Sea, but the Eidolon is just, I don't know that I can afford to get shocked. But then I take 5 from the attack and go to 5, and then the Vial goes to 3. Then maybe I could, like, I guess my only hope at that point is they attack. We Vial in the Architect before blocks. The Mausoleum Wanderer becomes a 2/2 and can block the Eidolon, and then the 1/3 Architect blocks the Goblin Guide, and then we take one from the Swift Spear, go into 4, and we hope that they're just a little flooded this game or have more creatures instead of like more burn spells. I guess that's our I mean it's a thin line, but I think that's our only line to give us a chance to win this game at this point. Like that lightning bolt on the copter was just really brutal. Like that was the key play of this game so far. So end step, they crack. Okay, play a tapped Shockland. Untap, attack. Okay, well, what do we see after the Goblin Guide? We see another Spreading Seas. Wonderful. That's exactly what we needed. All right, they pass. Vial up to 3. All right, well, we're setting up the play. We're at 5, though. So, I'm not liking our chances since they missed their land drop. Uh, 3 cards in hand. They didn't play a creature, didn't play a land. Um, well, all right, let's see what it is. All right, Boros Charm. So the Boros Charm puts us to 1. Even if we vial into play the Architect and block, we still take the 1 lethal from the Swift Spear. So at this point, we do still have an out though. So even though, like, if the Boros Charm resolves and we go to 1, then we're literally dead on board. They just attack with all their creatures. We vial into play the Architect and we're just dead. But there is something else we can do. Do you see what it is? I'll give you a second. Alright, so here's what we do. We can vial into play the Architect in response. So now the Wanderer is a 2/2. So now we can sack the Wanderer to counter the Boros Charm unless they pay 2. And so we're countering the Boros Charm and staying at 5. Unfortunately, this means when we block one of their 2-powered creatures, we take 3 on their turn and go to 2, assuming they have nothing, which, since they didn't play a land or a creature, it's like almost assuredly they do have something. But at least on board, we're not dead like we would have been if we don't take this line. So we counter the Boros Charm. We set up a block in combat. So then we'd be going to 2 life. Well, I finally got a land off the Goblin Guide. And then they just have the Helix to kill us. So we kind of put ourselves in a position a couple times to like that. I mean, that was a desperation attempt here to counter the Boros Charm. But yeah, the copter, having the bolt for the copter was huge. Like even though the Wanderer plays around Helix, so even if it's a Helix or like that won't work. So this was close. And like I said, if you want to improve this matchup, you definitely want the one engineered explosives. And then you also would want to add spell skites. So I would recommend cutting maybe a ceremonial rejection and a void mage prodigy for the 3 spell skites instead of 1, and then adding the explosives over the brittle effigy. So then you're basically adding 3 really solid cards for the matchup, and that would really improve it. And I mean, it wasn't terrible. We went to 3 games, and if that copter play would have worked out, I think we would have been in a significantly better position and probably won this game reasonably easily. So that was mono red, burn.